and I'll jump into Trello. So you guys can see Trello at the moment. Can someone just yell out if you can see Trello?
Yeah, we can see.
Okay, cool.
Yelling.
Thanks. Yeah. Okay, so there's a thing in here that's gone in assignment 3, the mihimihi, and I'll come down here to the brief. With this Trello, we're going to keep using Trello again. So every time you post something up, or I post something up, I want it to go on the very top of the board, so it's the first thing that we see. So I'll come down here and I'll open up the brief. And we'll come down to assignment 3. Great. Okay. So with, oh, sorry, kind of a wee bit too far. Okay. So with this assignment, the workbook and the actual work go hand in hand. So you do both for the one assignment. The first 2 assignments, it was separated out because it was a portfolio of the work and it was all the workings that led up to it. This time, because we have a theme as such for those images, there's going to be other things that come in with the workbook. So things like thumbnails, conceptual thinking, research around that subject. So the 2 will go kind of hand in hand. So so I'll just quickly read through this. So it's a series of work that communicates the concept of mihimihi, and I'll talk about that in a second. The thing that's changed here is the assignment was supposed to be based around te awaha. So it was going to be about the building and your new surroundings. This time round, it's going to be about Wellington itself. So te whanganui atara. So that's going to be the subject matter, and it says here, what would you, could you acknowledge the cultures, the location, the city, the community, its history or its whakapapa. So so there can be a wide variety of responses for the mihimihi. The other thing with this as well is that it's a contemporary take on mihimihi. So there's the tradition of it, and we'll talk about that as we go through. So you need to create photographs, drawings, but can incorporate pre-existing found material. So the final will have photographs, drawings, printing, all sorts of things. It's the same thing. It all comes back to a digital photo collage. So everything kind of leads into that. There's a couple of things that we'll have to change because of COVID-19. So obviously the first one is lino cut, and there'll be things like the chemical side of things that we won't be able to do as well. But some things like the phototype wall we will be able to do, because we can do that on a phone. So presentation requirements. So 2 photo collages. The lino print, we'll have to replace that, and the type wall image, we'll be able to do that. And the same sort of thing, it's going to be presented as a PDF. So, but this bit now, you might want to grab a pen and write down, because obviously with it being a mihimihi, you'll need to do research around that in your workbook. But what you're going to find is when you type it in, it might not come up with exactly the same take on mihimihi that I have. And so what you'll find is that online, a lot of what they talk about is what I refer to as a pepeha. And so to kind of summarize it a bit, and we'll use a pōwhiri as an example. So when you enter onto, when you're welcome onto a marae, once the speeches and the introductions and everything start, it starts with a mihimihi. And my take on that term is that a mihi is an acknowledgement of something or someone. And so mihimihi just means it's a number of acknowledgements. Now, what happens is when someone gets up and speaks, so if I do it, there's a sequence. It always starts with a whakatauki. So this is something that you're going to have to look up, and I've got some examples. There's a link on the Trello board. But in some way, you'll have to research whakatauki, and that will have to be combined into the final image. Now, it can be degraded, it can be highlighted, it can be part of it. This is your playing with the concept of how you're going to utilize the whakatauki in your work. And it says there's 2 photo collages. The whakatauki can be in both of them, or it can be in just one, as long as you have it included in your work somewhere. Once the whakatauki is done, there's a set of acknowledgements. And so the first one traditionally is you'll acknowledge things like Papatū Nuku and Anganui. So you're an acknowledgement of the gods. There's you'll have an acknowledgement that's for the mana whenua, so the people of that region that you're seeing. After that, there'll be an acknowledgement of the people that have passed away before you, so the people that have gone. There'll be an acknowledgement of the whare or the building that you're in. So the whole way through, there's this kind of progression. Now, the bit that becomes a little bit confusing when you look it up online is after you've done all these acknowledgements, there's a part that's referred to as the pepeha. And that's where the very, very last statement is you going, oh, and I am, and you kind of give your lineage or talk about yourself. So the significance of this is everything else is more important than you. You are the final part of it. So the last thing, so even in your pepeha, you talk about your mountain, you talk about your river, you talk about your ancestors, and then the very final bit is your name, who you are. So in this assignment, we're focusing on the acknowledgements. There's in no way is this about you. So the pepeha side of things, we're going to leave out altogether. Okay, so in terms of Wellington, and part of it can be kind of fantasy orientated. So if you're new to Wellington, the way that you what do you acknowledge when you're new to a city? What are the things you understand about it? Especially if you come from overseas, you have this idea that New Zealand and Wellington, it's about clean and green, or what's your perspective on it? So the things that you need to research is history, community, attitudes, surroundings, places, anything and everything you can. If you're into, remember the things that you're kind of into, because it's also about acknowledging things that are important to you. So let's say if you're into music, what defines music in Wellington, what would you give homage to? You know, would you have Trinity Roots or something like that within the imagery? If you're a skateboarder, I know that there's an area that's up above Newtown Sports Stadium where I can't remember, I think it used to be an old basketball court or something, and people have turned it into a kind of homemade or DIY skateboarding rink, and there's kind of a community around that. So all of these things can kind of be packaged into the photo montage. So so normally, I suppose what you do is when it's about you, you'd have a figure in the middle and then kind of branch out from that. This time around, because it's not about you, you know, what's going to be your kind of central character, if you will? How will things kind of work as an image? And this is where all your kind of conceptual thinking comes in, and how you're going to play around with things. I don't mind there being an image of a person, or even yourself in the center. If for you Wellington is about the people, but it can't be obvious that it's you. In some way, it has to be diluted back, or it has to become a person that's a bit more generic. So this is, you know, your framing of this is going to come through in the conceptual work. So that's in a very brief nutshell what's going on with this assignment. So it is going to try and pull those things that oh damn, sorry, I think I just got rid of Trello. Sorry, give us a second. Let's bring it back. Okay, can you guys give me a quick shout? Can you see Trello still?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. All right. So in messages in this first panel, we've got this section here, which has got whakatauki in it. So if we click on that, and if you look up whakatauki, you're going to find a myriad of sites. You know, unless you are fluent with Te Reo, you'll always be looking at a site that ends up having the meaning or the English translation of it. In general, that's what they like. So sort of find a whakatauki that relates to the way, I suppose, that you feel about Wellington, or what you acknowledge. Two ways you can do this. You could actually look up whakatauki to do with the local people in Wellington. So you'd be looking up whakatauki that are associated with Te Ati Awa, or you can just look up these kind of you know, general ones, and take one from there. But this is the classic koe mati whika mati ururoa. So don't die like an octopus, die like a hammerhead shark. So a lot of people have heard that one. And you'll find all these sorts of things, like an image search will bring up a massive amount of whakatauki. Now this one here, design fundamentals, I've chucked another thing in here. If I click on this, there's the PDF that you may have already seen, and you've got to keep coming back to this sort of stuff. I'm sure you would have been taught the basics of this, hopefully, but the idea of scale and contrast, you're always going to be coming back to. So here that, you know, the contrast of color, the contrast of the type against the image, and the fact that, you know, other than the images, this is very centered, and the images are all kind of off center slightly. No focal points, what you look at first. So all of this stuff starts to become a lot more pivotal. Now I've stuck another one in here. Oh God, sorry, I just got rid of Trello again. I need to sort it out.
Don't worry, it happens. I was doing it the other day.
Oh God, just all right, cool. So the other one that I've popped in here, and it can be sometimes there's some really terrible stuff written about it on the web, but this one I found was quite good. Negative space. So for me, negative space is the number one crucial thing when it comes to design. And this one's quite good. It's actually dealing with it in terms of UI, I think, or mobile devices and all that sort of thing. But it goes through what it is, how it's been utilized, and this talks about negative space in quite a good way. Because if I all right, cool. Just checking that I'm not going to get rid of Trello again. If I have a look at one here, so there's this one here, negative space, 24 brilliant examples. So can you all see this one? Are you looking at the website or Trello?
No, look at the website.
You're looking at, oh, okay, cool. Okay, that's good. So there's quite a bit of this stuff when people talk about negative space, and you look it up, you can end up with things like this, where the negative space they're talking about is embedded in. So Formula One racing, but the numbers kind of left out. And this sort of thing where you end up with, you know, a lion and a gorilla forming the kind of negative space on the street. It is negative space, but it's a really, it's a poor version of it. It's not the way I want you to think of negative space. And so, you know, things like this where Cookie Monster's face kind of makes the negative space in the cookie, they're really terrible examples. No, so
Some of them are terrible. Some of them are okay.
I suppose when I say terrible, I mean it's a terrible understanding of negative space.
Mm-hmm.
You're right. You know, some of the examples are pretty clever. It's not my thing, but like, so for example, this one here, they'll talk about the negative space. So this, the fact that you can see ice cream, but it's not actually done. It's the kind of negative space that creates it. The negative space that I'm talking about is the minimal space. So the fact that this has a whole lot of white space around it. And that's the other term that you'll hear is negative space. A lot of people don't even call it that. They call it white space. And that might be the confusion. If you look up white space, it might be closer to what I'm talking about. I'm just used to saying negative space. So this thing here with the inside of the giraffe head, the negative space makes it look like an ink pen. But the negative space that's really important on this image is all this blank space that sits around it. And if you look at that other link that's on Trello, it actually, that's the way it talks about it, is it talks about negative space in a slightly different way. It talks about minimalism and focus rather than the kind of illusionistic take on the space. So, hey, any quick questions about that? Hey, uh, uh, Margaret, and I'll get to it after all this. And the same for all of you. Buyun found that she could hand in by putting stuff in the student folder because her files were too big. So I'll show you that in a minute.
Oh,
And
the website that you gave me seemed to work.
oh, the WeTransfer one.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Okay. Oh, that's good. I tried making a folder for the other class, and it didn't work. So I was surprised that Buyun was able to do what she did, but she could. So that's awesome. But if it's come through on WeTransfer,
Yeah, I sent it through there. It's quite big.
that's fine. I mean, the WeTransfer takes up to 2 gigabytes, so it's usually it's usually really good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think mine's pretty big too for boosting my memory.
Yeah, I mean probably the biggest hassle will be the connection you have at home.
Yeah.
Rather than being able to get it across. I mean, it's a hassle that the online learning when it comes to hand-ins and all that sort of stuff. So just with the assignment with mihimihi, have you got any questions about that? Oh, okay. I just saw a message from Vanessa. It's a really good point. If you're not in Wellington, you can base this project on wherever you are. Okay, so it doesn't have to be Wellington. You still have to have the whakatauki and do that kind of research. But the reason I say that is I want you to have the ability, whether it's with your phone or whether it's with a camera or whatever, that you can actually still just take photographs in your location. And there's all sorts of things that can add into this, like the acknowledgement of your surroundings. So for example, let's say your surroundings, you're stuck in some kind of student flat and it's a bomb site because no one does the dishes and takes care of that. That's still something you can acknowledge. So, and that's what I mean by a contemporary take on it. We're not going to go through that stuff if you don't have to have this kind of gods, locals, blah, blah. You can play with this in a number of ways. Even when it comes to the whakatauki, if you have a concept or you can explain to me, you can write it in English. But I would need to have a rationale, and that rationale might be, well, my background is English, or I'm a Pākehā New Zealander, or I'm from overseas and I've had no real contact with Te Reo Māori or something like that. If you're from overseas, you could probably argue and say, well, actually, I'll do the idea of the proverb or the whakatauki, but I'm from the Philippines, so I'm going to do it in my my version of that. Or maybe you can argue that you want to use a proverb from that area. So if we discuss this stuff, we can definitely have a play with it. But fundamentally, everything that goes into the image and everything you do has a reason. And for me, this comes right down to the mark making. Every time you do a shaky line, that represents something. It has a quality, whether you like it or not. If you if you use spray, if you use spray paint to do writing, and you photograph that, it means something, because spray painted writing means everything from resistance or revolution. If you think about the spray painting on the streets of Hong Kong, it also means graffiti, which some people are going to see as vandalism. Others are going to see as a voice of the disenfranchised, or all sorts of things, or as an art form. So everything has some form of meaning, and that's, for me, that's the kind of exciting part of this project, is that you get to play with it a bit more. Okay, so that should help that question. Anything else? Don't forget, you can send it by chat if you don't want to voice up on the...
Could I have a meeting with you like after, so we can, just as a backup, put my files into the other files?
Yeah, for sure. Yep, there's no
Because I forgot to send my Photoshop 2 files into the one that I did last night.
Okay, like that, that's fine. And for everyone, remember that we've got until midnight. If you need help, and or you want to add, chuck something into the workbook, then absolutely do it. The workbook is kind of a system as well that we get used to. The way that you do research, because I know as well for this one where the workbook is combined, and I want you to think about this stuff, is that I do it myself, but in general, when we work on computers, you just kind of get in and start working straight away, and sometimes things they develop on the computer. They're never actually down on paper or done as rough sketches. So I know that that's a way of working, but I still want you to go through the process of trying to do rough sketches and doing things in a physical workbook for two reasons. One, because it's good practice. You do find that if you kind of map things out and do drawings and that sort of thing, that you can end up getting a better result. And also because as a designer or an illustrator, when you're freelancing, when you're doing a job, and someone's gonna pay you $5,000 for doing something, sometimes you need to have that extra work, because it can be hard. Like, for instance, if you do a logo for someone and you take it in and you've got a circle with a letter in the middle of it, and you go, here you go, so can I have my $5,000? It's still legitimate, but sometimes you'll end up with clients and people that are like, that seems like a lot for what you did. And it's because they don't understand the work that goes into it. So sometimes there is a process of educating clients and having that groundwork, so that you can say, well, actually, there's 4 years of training or 3 years of training and all this other stuff that kind of goes into this logo. So it's just, at the moment, it's a good practice thing. Yeah.
For the first part of the assessment,
are you talking the last one or this one?
the one that we're meant to hand in today.
Oh, yeah.
I'm a bit confused. The images that we need for the first part of the assessment, were those meant to be the ones we took in class?
Oh, okay, yeah. The first part of the assessment. This is where COVID-19 completely stuffs us up, because some people who were better with photography have probably taken their photographs, got some good results. So they've got stuff in their workbook and they can take those photos and they can hand them in. Others were probably learning photography for the first time, and so they don't have all of their photos, or maybe they have some, or
Yeah.
they haven't taken them all, and then they, they haven't got access to a digital camera. So it seems unfair to be penalised for that. So what I've asked is that you use the photos that you've taken first, and there may be some photos that you can take on a phone. So, for instance, a long depth of field, probably a phone camera will do that automatically. But if you don't have some images and you need something, I'm okay if you use an image that you've found or from somewhere else. But what I need you to have written that it's come from somewhere else, that it's not your image, and you have to do a bit of a write-up to explain what's going on. So if you don't have a long exposure photo, so that's what you use. You find a photo online of a whole lot of car lights going along a motorway. You have to be able to say, for this kind of long exposure photograph, I would have a low ISO, so it's not sensitive to light, and that means that I could have a high aperture, or basically a small aperture but a high number, and all of these things mean that I can have the shutter speed open for a longer period of time. And if it's open for a longer period of time, it will blur the lights, and then you could put down, because it's open for a long time, I need to have a tripod. And the reason you have to do that is obviously if you hand in a photo and it has the shutter speed and all that sort of thing, and you've taken it, I can see that you understand it. But if it's not your photo, the only way that I know you understand the principle is that you have to write what's going on.
Okay, so I guess that made cleared some things up, but also confused a bit of other things, because I thought for the PDF that we were meant to make,
yeah,
that's where we were meant to put in all of our write-up about the different parts. So
oh no, for me, I would have thought that, because everything's in your workbook.
Yeah.
So for me, the writing goes hand in hand with the workbook, and what you're doing with assignment 2 is saying, well, that's my best photograph, that's my best drawing, and handing those in as assignment 2. And obviously with the photograph, it would be easier for me if you hand in a photograph that it has the ISO, so I don't have to pick through your workbook.
Sorry.
Okay, so that's where a bit of complication comes up for me, because I don't have access to any of the photos that I've taken, because they were all on the school drive, which I can't access at the moment.
Have you tried going to your OneDrive though?
I have.
Oh.
So most of the photos that I would have had were taken as part of the groups.
Yeah.
And they were put on like the default student drive on the computers.
Okay.
And
who was in your group?
Wait, Anton, I might have some of the stuff from the first week.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
Would be helpful.
Anton, get what you can if you can, but don't stress too much, because the very first part of that assignment is difficult, because everyone's in all sorts of different positions. But what I need to be able to pass you and everything is just to know that you've got that understanding. That's the crucial
yeah.
for that.
Yeah, that was partially why a couple of weeks ago I was asking if I could use some of my dad's photos.
Right.
But
Yeah.
So
That's good. That's okay.
am I able to use his photos for the for both part 1 and part 2 of the assessment, or am I only allowed to use them for part 1?
No. Part part one is kind of everything, and you're just selecting. So it would be in both. I mean, that's the thing for part 2, for assessment 2. If you don't have a shallow depth of field photo, if it's on the student drive and you can't access it through, any other students or any other way, you've got to have something, and sure, use your dad's photo.
Okay.
But that's the thing. I just need to have that acknowledgement.
Yeah.
And I have to be able to see the write up to know that you can say, okay, well, this is shallow depth of field, and this is what's happening.
Okay.
Okay, cool.
I think I'm starting understanding a bit better now.
I realized when we did the I think it might have been when I was catching up doing depth of field, I was meant to go do some studio photos, but I didn't get time. So I ended up using photos that I took in one of my other classes last year.
Yeah. Same thing, Perry. Just acknowledge that those photos come from a different time and place.
Yep.
And give me a write up with them that says this is what's happening and why it works. Yeah, the studio photographs thing just fall under the ISO sensitivity, but basically the requirements for that is just to hand in a couple of photos that relate to light differently, because the studio session became this kind of watch and learn more than a practical session where you all get to have a go, just because of the logistics of numbers and time and stuff.
Yeah.
It would have been something that ideally, with this assignment here, those that want a studio shot or something, object or whatever, could say, oh, okay, I've got the knowledge, I can go and have a go at it, or I could help them with that. But c'est la vie.
Well, the one that I was looking forward to doing was monoprint, because some of us, like Jason and Vanessa and I and Zeta, have already done those from last year.
Oh, you did monoprints?
How to use them.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's just the unfortunate thing of COVID-19.
Yeah.
But stuff like that as well. Like, I'm quite open that when we actually do get back into the rooms, even if it's not something that relates to a brief, if you guys want to, learn some of that stuff or do it, we could certainly, do it at a lunchtime or when you've got a space of time or something.
Yep.
Okay. Any more questions about the brief?
I have one, Adrian, just about the acknowledgements that you were talking about.
Oh, yeah.
Can you just clarify? So you were talking about acknowledgements of the gods and the people that have passed and things like that in the region. Are you meaning? Or?
Sorry, I probably didn't explain that. That was just to try and explain the mihimihi process in a traditional sense. That's what happens. It's a series of acknowledgements, and traditionally that's the way it works. For you guys, the question is what do you think, or what would you acknowledge in the area you are? And that's why I brought up that thing, kind of saying, if you're into music and you're based in Wellington, who do you think is important to acknowledge? Would you acknowledge Trinity Roots or someone else? If you're someone that is into hip hop, who would you acknowledge in that region? Or historically, what would you acknowledge. And so this is the thing, is the personal take on it means that if you are based in Wellington and someone else is, you could come up with completely different visuals because you acknowledge different things. Yeah. So someone's going to acknowledge, oh my God, I can't remember. I can't believe I've forgotten her name. The Wellington poet that has a house up Nairn Street.
Catherine Mansfield?
Catherine Mansfield, yeah. So, she's a prolific kind of, or incredible Wellingtonian. Someone else might think that they want to acknowledge Peter Jackson and Weta. So there's lots of flexibility on the way that you attack this project. But yeah, the one before was just traditionally this is what happens. Now with you, how would you do it for the place where you are? What would you do and what would you acknowledge?
Cool. Yeah, perfect.
Sorry, just looking at the chat for a second. I just had a question that says, would 4 pictures for the portfolio be enough? So best photo, best drawing, collage, texture. Yeah, with the photos, you have to cover those areas, the shallow depth of field, the long depth of field, because I need to know that you understand those. Need to understand those processes. So I realized here that things like you took photographs when we were in the cinema on my camera, and you haven't got them, stuff like that. But find an image, and I know that you took those photos on the day and that sort of thing. But if it's just one photo, I won't know if you understand those differences between shutter speed and aperture and stuff. So it's got to be the total thing with the photos. Okay. Yeah, I'll go with that. There's the bit about can it be a negative aspect of the city, or does it have to be positive? I'm gonna let you go for negative. I mean, in the traditional sense, you're kind of, in the traditional sense, you're waxing lyrical about the beauty and the wonder of the people that you're visiting. You'd never get up and say, "Oh my God, you guys can't cook for shit. This is terrible," But yeah, for this assignment, it's a contemporary take for sure. Any other questions?
No, I'll ask my questions when we have one-on-one.
Okay, cool. So look, I'm just going to stop this recording,